Yeah, it's not on.
Yeah, I noticed that on the Buddha speaks of to the noble ones, and he speaks about the jhanas, and he explains to them about the jhanas. Or not the Buddha, I meant to say the monk, of course. But then he goes into the 21 or 20, and then he's actually, I don't know if I'm right, but he's talking to a lay person. Because he states here that an untaught, or an ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and his own skill. So I noticed that they changing the perspective of discipline. In other words, he's talking about the noble ones, and the other side he's talking to a lay person. Is that right?
Well, it's setting up a contrast between, this isn't a contrast between a lay person and a monk. It's not in terms of their ordination status or lack of ordination, but this is the contrast is between what is called the Putujana, which is the ordinary common person of the world, and the Arya Savaka, who is a noble disciple, or a disciple of the noble ones. So this is the contrast between one who just follows the way of the world and has, the view of self and then identifies the five aggregates as the self, and one who has learned the Dhamma of the noble ones and therefore doesn't identify any of the five aggregates as self. Yeah. So the contrast here isn't between, would be a Gahapati or a Gihi, a layperson, and a Bhikshu, a monk.
Right.
But rather the contrast is between Putujana and Arya Savaka.
But what is interesting is that he goes into an advanced stage of teaching. Is more or less a person that's already gone into second, third, fourth jhanas. Then he goes right back down into a lay person and explains a person that is that is ordinary and thought.
I see.
The contrast is, to the different personalities. Or lay person and the monks or the noble ones. It's got
that's because the contrast here is revolving around whether they, you see, when he's speaking about the monk, then he's speaking about the attainment of the various stages, meditative stages, the jhanas. Okay, and so that is considered like the special domain of the monk. But now, in this the passage on Sakkaya, on personality view, on identity view, the contrast, it doesn't involve whether a person is a monk or not a monk, but whether the person is a worldling, an ordinary person who's not instructed in the Dhamma, and that is the person who identifies five aggregates as self, and a person, whether monk or lay person, who's instructed in the Dhamma and doesn't identify as self.
Yeah, but the clingings are different, of course, because the clinging on the noble ones is the first jhana, the second jhana. Is actually, you could be attached to rapture, where it's actually an attainment, it's actually very advanced stage. Where on the other side, with the lay person, he goes way back into the attachments of worldly, sensual pleasures. So it's a big contrast there of sensual desires. One is actually from the attainment, from the second and third, and of course the fourth you have equanimity, where you let go of sensual pleasures. You're not attached. You're not clinging to that third or second or first.
The jhanas are not explained in terms of the noble person. You said the jhanas are explained in terms of the noble one.
Not that it is, but I would speculate that it would be a noble person if he's already at that stage.
No, he's just speaking in terms of the bhikkhu. Oh. And also remember that these are we call them stock formulas. So whenever the formula for the four jhanas are given, the stock formula, almost always it has the bhikkhu as the practitioner. Okay. When the contrast between is set up around Sakkaya Ditthi, the view of self, the contrast is always that between the ordinary person and the noble disciple.
That makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Tsering?
Bhante, in your talk you mentioned about through non-clinging you have agitations.
Yeah.
And I understand it in another way. It would be like there are times when beings are accustomed to holding on to
Yeah.
sense spheres.
Yeah.
When these sense spheres are absent,
Yeah.
then you get agitated.
That's a good explanation. Except I still think that the text has come down with wrongly transcribed, because, okay, if through non-clinging there is agitation, if that was the correct original reading, one would expect some explanation to show how this could be the case, since it's such a departure from the usual formula. And yet the explanation is the same as the regular formula that we come to when the Buddha is explaining how through non-clinging there is no agitation. So it seems to me that, again, I don't want to be like insistent on it, but I'm pretty sure that there's just been a transcription error that has gotten into the record.
And they just want to add a little bit more.
Yeah.
I come from a tradition of Tibetans and from the Himalayan region. So there is a practice in the evenings when they kind of make offerings to those beings who have no body.
Yeah.
So these beings, so-called beings with no body, they're looking for some form of body, and then
Yeah.
they cannot find a body. So they are undergoing through a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
And that's because they haven't found a body.
Yeah.
This is just my...
I see. So they are having, call this agitation or distress, because they're looking for something to cling to.
Yes. They're lacking bodies. So
Yeah.
as they had a body before, are accustomed to having some form of body to cling to,
Yeah.
so they are in a great form of agitation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the practice is just,
Yeah.
of course, metta, I think, is there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's a good way to explain the phrase, through non-clinging there is agitation. And that accords with what the commentary says, that there's nothing that can be clung to. But it just seems to me, because the explanation that comes actually illustrates the case where somebody doesn't have clinging because he doesn't identify with self, and so he doesn't have agitation. Yes, I think, Chris, did you have your hand? Okay, Bowe had her hand.
Okay, my comment was just that I think what he was describing is clinging, wanting to have a body, not having a body and wanting to have it, thinking about having a body, seeking to have a body, this is clinging. I mean,
yeah, one could also say that that is a kind of clinging, yeah. But even though they have the clinging, but and as I said, his explanation agrees with a bit with what the commentary says. They have clinging, and they're searching for something, but they can't find anything to cling to. And so that causes the agitation. Okay, first we take Bowe, then Richard, and then Stacy, and then Caroline.
My question is pretty simple. Can that negation, because in Chinese we can put that bu to negate the following four words. So one does not, and bracket is upadana.
Yeah.
And,
You're asking whether this would work in Pali?
yeah, the original, can that negation to negate both? To cling.
No,
and
because in
to-
Pali we have anupada paritasana, so it's not using the negative particle na, but it's using the negative prefix an.
Yeah, but I remember in another passage in the Sabha Sutta Banana, and that it said because that the villager is supposed to hand in a gift to the king. And it's the similar structure, right? I asked Bande several times, and that negation is also from, it's not from NA9. It's
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so that negate both.
Yeah. No, I
No.
don't think so.
Okay.
Because in here we have the contrast is clearly between upada paritasana. Through clinging there is agitation, and anupada paritasana. Through non-clinging there is agitation.
Okay, thank you. And since I have the microphone, can I have another question? Just, what makes Bante think that the shifting in word from vijnana consciousness to citta is insignificant? It's because Bante wants to avoid dispute?
No.
Or it's a really, Bante really believes it this way, it's insignificant. It's, because I think this sutta is quite abhidharmic.
Yeah.
You can see the transitional features there.
Yeah.
And in the Abhidhamma, we emphasize more on the citta, right?
Yeah.
And in suttas, it is consciousness. And usually Bhante say, okay, in the suttas, consciousness is synonymous with citta. But then when it comes to the Abhidhamma, they are two different.
No.
Because citta is the chocolate box. And they are so, you have to put, I think maybe mental consciousness is one of the chocolates. So there's you can see they are different. They are not identical. So
No, I think in this
okay.
sutta, the two are being leave out of the discussion, the Abhidhamma versus sutta. It's just that you could see that the text uses sometimes vijnana, then it shifts to citta, and apparently there's no difference in meaning.
So it's really insignificant.
It's insignificant, yeah.
Even we call this textbook as highly recension.
Highly.
What's the word? Highly recension text? No, recension.
Recension.
Yeah, highly under critical revision. What's the word for it? Recension. No.
Recension. Yeah.
So in what sense it's highly recensioned? That's the word in Bhante's introduction, I remember. A word say...
Recension usually means like a version of a text.
Yeah, but it's under critical revision, yeah. Or at certain crucial points to accommodate the tenets of their schools.
Yeah, but this is not, I don't think this has undergone revision to accommodate the tenets of the Theravada school in any way. I think this, as I said, it's just that the text changes in the use of the word, vijnana, citta, without, as I said, that there's no, maybe this is the point, actually. I think there is a point. Okay, now I think I see the reason. Because it's speaking in terms of the 6 sense objects. You see, so when vijnana is used in the suttas, it's usually the 6 kinds of vijnana in relation to the 6 faculties: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body, mind consciousness. So when describing the 6 spheres of sensory experience, vijnana is used. And so this is the case where the text is speaking about seeing a form with the eye, hearing a sound with the ear, and so on. So it's describing it's describing the experience in terms of the 6 sense domains. So in that case, vijnana is the appropriate word to use. But then when we come to the next section on the jhanas, then for jhana, then citta is more appropriate because we're not dividing the experience up in terms of the sense domains. Got it? So that makes sense. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Isn't there a point in insight when you first let go of the clinging, where you sort of become fearful or horrified of all your past clinging, and could it relate to that?
I don't. You mean this passage? Through non-clinging, there is agitation.
Yeah.
I have to be a bit stubborn and insistent. If it were relating to something else, if that expression were genuine, authentic, ancient, the original part of the original discourse, then the explanation that follows would explain the meaning. But as I said, the explanation that follows makes sense if we take through non-clinging there is no agitation. Not through non-clinging there is agitation. Or through clinging there is... Now I'm getting mixed up. Yeah. Yeah, the explanation makes sense if we understand the original expression to be saying, through non-clinging there is no agitation. It doesn't make sense if we take the original expression to be, through non-clinging there is agitation. Oh, who is to take? Mike or Richard? Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Tsering if the creatures were hungry ghosts, because this spiritual creatures and ghosts and such, in popular lore, tend to have a national flavor. A bunch of ingredients get in there that aren't purely theological. And so I was wondering what the character of these, there's the frustrated creatures who were attached to their forms and couldn't find their, didn't have their bodies, and so were grieved because of that. I was wondering, because for instance, there are creatures in Japanese legend, right, that have little hollows on the tops of their heads where they have oil, and they can't tilt their heads different ways because if they lose their oil, they die. And so they always have to, and the hungry ghosts have very small necks so that they can't swallow anything and such. And so I was just wondering, I wanted to know more about these creatures, if they were hungry ghosts. Tsering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's asking Tsering, not me.
Yeah. Right. Tsering, are they hungry ghosts? What kind of can you say more about these creatures? What are they like?
Okay, you're wrong, and then Carolyn.
Bhante, my question is about nimitta,
Yeah,
especially about Dhamma nimitta.
yeah,
We often say the three characteristics of Dhamma would be impermanence,
yeah,
non-self, and suffering, dukkha.
yeah.
Are they nimitta? That's the first part of the question.
No, that's a different word, actually. that word, I think it gets translated into Chinese by the same character, xiang. Or xiang, but it's, in Pali there are different words. This is here, nimitta, and the three, what are called the three dharma seals, would be, in Pali, lakkhana.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, terms aside, I'm not a stickler for terms,
Yeah,
but say if a meditator
yeah,
was clinging to the signs of a particular level of jhana,
yeah,
and then realize that that particular sign is impermanent, is non-self, is dukkha, therefore is able to move on. But isn't that a distraction by itself? Because you're supposed to focus on something, and then your mind starts to wonder, wow, this is actually non-self, this is impermanent. So in a way, the concept or the ideas of non-self and impermanent is a object of the mind base. The mind
yeah,
grasps on a dhamma. So if whether you call it lakkhanas or nimitta, when we realize that a particular sign we're investigating is
Yeah.
non-self, is impermanent,
yeah,
then in a way my mind has drifted away from my original focus of attention
yeah,
in order to reach that.
yeah,
And then once I do
Oh.
that, and if I just finish this, if I persist on, if I persist on thinking everything is non-self, is impermanent,
yeah.
then isn't that itself a clinging also?
Isn't that?
Is self a clinging, an attachment?
Yeah. Actually, there are several questions here. I mean, within that. Okay, if one is practicing samadhi meditation with the aim of reaching the jhana, or if one is in the jhana and sort of lightly comes out and then starts thinking this is impermanent, but one's objective is to focus and strengthen the jhana, then that's a distraction. One would just realize, I'm not practicing now in order to do insight or vipassana. My purpose is to either achieve or to strengthen the samadhi, the jhana. So then one would just, if thoughts relating to insight arise, one would just put them aside and go back and to strengthen the concentration. Because that is one's immediate purpose. Okay, so that is, I think, the first question that you asked. The second, if you become sort of delighted with the insight into impermanence, isn't that a kind of attachment? Was that the question? Yeah. Now you're piling on question after question, so I have to take them one at a time. Okay, you said, if I'm completely dedicated to concentration, how can I ever reach insight? No, there'll come a time when one has the concentration sufficiently stabilized, then one would realize that this is not sufficient, then I want to do insight, and then one will develop insight. The fact that one is devoting some time to developing concentration doesn't mean that one never gets to insight. Well, one has to make the effort. It's not that the insight arises by itself, but just for different people, it will be at different stages, depending on a lot of circumstances. But say somebody obtains, say the first jhana, stabilizes it, makes it well consolidated, then they'll think, okay, now I want to develop insight on this. And then they'll use that as a basis for developing insight. Others might go on, not stopping with the first jhana, but going on second, third, fourth jhana. Then after stabilizing the fourth jhana, developing insight. Yeah. 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 Clinging to belief. Well, of course, if one can create time to actually do the practice, then it's much better. But suppose that there's just so many demands on one's time, I wouldn't consider having the understanding of impermanence, dukkha, non-self, inherent. I wouldn't understand that to be intrinsically an object of clinging or an attachment. Sometimes people, I've seen this with Buddhists in Sri Lanka, because they sometimes adopt the tenets of Buddhism a little bit dogmatically, then it becomes an object of attachment, particularly when they're getting in conflicts with followers of other religions. Oh, you believe in the soul, but the Buddha teaches non-self. So that becomes, there's no soul, just a delusion. So that's in a way taking it as an object of attachment. But if one uses it, you could use impermanence, suffering, non-self, even if one is not developing it to the level of meditative insight, but you could still apply it to situations in everyday life, like a close relative dies. Of course, one might go through a certain period of mourning, but other people, without the idea of impermanence, just become, why did he have to die? He should have been around forever. Oh, I just can't get over his loss. Oh, it's so miserable. But if you have the insight or the understanding of impermanence, you think, this is the nature of things. Whatever arises, passes. And so he came, he lived, he's gone. That's the nature of things. And similarly with, say, the idea of self. Some people who have implicit idea of self, oh, I want to become the boss, I want to become the chairman, I want to become the famous, I want to become popular. All of this is rooted in some kind of subtle attachment to self. And then they become very competitive, manipulative, ambitious to fulfill that craving for the glorification of the self. But when we have the idea or some understanding of anatta, even if it's not the deep meditative, then we realize this is not mine, not I, not myself. So why try to glorify it? Why try to, what's the point of all of this competitiveness and ambition and self-glorification? So you could use this in day-to-day life. Okay, I think Carolyn had a question. You have the microphone already.
Is it on?
Yes, on.
Yeah. It's not exactly a question. It was an observation.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I had when I read this last night, and it got even stronger when we read it again today.
You cannot.
Pardon me?
You said so?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It seems so similar to me to the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra. When I read it last night, and even now when we did this in class, it seemed even more similarities.
Really?
Yeah, just like even like form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, the way it's stated, it's stated in different wording, but the same thing. And even with the Heart Sutra, it's Shariputra and Avalokita, and the Buddha is removed, not present.
He gave a...
Yeah, even the...
I think in the longer version of this Heart Sutra that's come down in the Tibetan tradition, I think it does open with the Buddha giving an Uddesa, and then...
And then he steps out, and then after the whole thing's over, the Buddha nods that, yes, it's correct. Avalokita correctly expounded. And even the name of it, the exposition of a summary or the analysis, to me, that says the same type of thing. That's just what arose.
I think Bowe wanted to say something.
It's true because the word for fear that Bante translated as agitation is
right.
actually the
Actually,
心无
that's,
挂碍无有恐怖.
actually that
That's
is right,
the,
yeah.
the phrase in the Heart
Yeah.
Sutra. I mean, the word Bante translated
Yeah,
as,
it's kongbu.
to agitation
Horrible,
is the 心无挂碍无有恐怖.
心无挂碍无
That
挂碍故无有
Agitation.
无有恐怖. But of course, kongbu is used to render a variety of Pali or a Sanskrit words, so we don't know what the original of Sanskrit word, what the original Sanskrit word is that was rendered kongbu, but it could have been paritrishyana in Sanskrit. Okay.
Bhante, the text was changed, you said, but if it would remain in its original agitation due to non-clinging,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be kind of like non-clinging based on wrong view, so it would create agitation? And it's a
non-clinging based on wrong view.
agitation based on non-clinging.
Yeah.
But it's non-clinging rooted in wrong view. It's the same like last week when the Buddha said about equanimity and and he's like, those fools, or I can't remember the words he used, but some of the people, the householders, their view of equanimity is not the correct equanimity as opposed to the bhikkhus. So I'm not sure why the change was necessary, because agitation due to non-clinging, it kind of makes sense.
Maybe to you it does, to me it doesn't.
I don't know.
No,
I mean, after reading it a few times, and reading the notes, you can get agitation from non-clinging if it's non-clinging rooted in wrong view.
But we don't see in the suttas, to my knowledge, any place where the Buddha
nowhere
speaks
else.
about non-clinging coming from wrong view. Wrong view is always taken to be a form of clinging.
Does that go back to, I think in the Heart Sutra it says, or something to, all view is wrong view, or?
I don't think the Heart Sutra says that.
or
That seems to be like a popular saying that I've heard coming from Zen circles. One that I disagree with also.
And also in the jhanas, to get to the succeeding jhanas, it's natural upon reflection, you have to abandon or in the first jhana and what you've gained from it, or else you'll never get to. So when the Buddha was talking about that, isn't that kind of a natural progression that we abandon, we take what we gained from the first jhana and before we can even get to the second jhana? In other words, if you're stuck and you're attached to that, you'll never get to the second jhana.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right? And,
well, maybe not. Maybe you could still be attached to the first, have some kind of attachment to the enjoyment of the first jhana. But then if one hears that the pleasure in the second jhana is superior, then then one will be...
But some of the states that arise or are present in the first jhana are not there in the second jhana, like joy. So if you're attached to that, you'll never attain the second jhana or the third and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Let's say one can be enjoying that joy in the first jhana, but still have upon hearing that the joy in the second jhana is superior, still make an aspiration and attain it, and then one has attachment to both kinds to both jhanas.
But there is no joy in the second.
No, there is.
Or is it the third jhana?
Well, the third
Third
is.
jhana, the equanimity, right?
Yeah.
So, and also, lastly, the Buddha gives the summary, and then the monks are like, "What should we do?" So you're like, "Oh, let's go to Mahā Kaccāna."
Yeah.
And then so they go, and he gives this long explanation, and they're like, "Oh, that was great. That was great. Let's go ask the Buddha."
Yeah, if they could have just either gotten the Buddha before he went into his room or waited a little while.
I think that's conspiracy. When Buddha is gone, you know whom to ask.
Anyway, don't forget that this is in a way that a little bit setting up a dramatic scene. There's sort of probably like blocks of text that have come down in oral tradition. Then one has to compose a background scene to explain how that exposition took place. And so this is the way it was done. Okay, unless somebody has a really pressing question, then we'll close for the day. You had a question?
It's not Bande.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm buying your opinion that is missing in transcription. But when you translate, you add the word, should you put a square bracket to the non-non?
Good editorial suggestion. Yes, it should have been done. Yeah, very good suggestion. No. But it's a correct suggestion. Excuse me?
I'm delighted, but I'm clinging to it.
Okay. If you guys want to discuss anything further, I will invite Mahā Kaccāna to come.
Thank you, Bande. We should let Bande rest.
Okay, so we'll do 3 bows to the Buddha.